Welcome back to City Skylines. Today I want to tackle what is, for me at least, by far one of the biggest criticisms that I have on the city, which is its severe lack of bodies of water. Just small ditches and ponds, not necessarily the rivers or canals, there's plenty of them to go around in this map, but just the small interaction with water that you so commonly find in neighborhoods in the Netherlands is something which I have very much missed out on in this city so far, and is something that I do want to try more. So this episode will sort of be my first step toward that, although I do have to say I'm not entirely going for these small ditches and ponds that you usually find, which has everything to do with the reasons why so far in the city I haven't really used any sort of water interaction in neighborhoods. It's just because the terraforming tools are quite clunky, and the water in this game can just be so unpredictable at times, and it just doesn't feel really made for these very small ditches and ponds that you commonly find in neighborhoods which sort of run through the neighborhoods, behind houses and alongside streets in a way that I find is near impossible to actually do in this in City Skylines. But it's still something I really wish to try, and yeah, this will sort of be a first step. Basically what I want to do, that is after I am done flooding my city over here, is to add a neighborhood which, even though it doesn't have these small separate ditches and ponds, has some water interaction in the shape of drawing water from the river and using them for some canals, sort of running through the middle of this neighborhood. It's very much inspired by a somewhat recent, it's not that recent anymore, housing project near Rotterdam called Carnisselande, which probably barely anyone knows what I'm talking about in this case, so I'll try to briefly explain what the idea is behind this. It sort of draws not just the basic shape inspiration from said neighborhood, but it's a housing project which draws some canals and a lot of water interaction from a nearby lake, and I really figured I could do a similar thing in this case and draw some water from the river, in which case I don't have to mess with having to work too precisely with the terraforming tools or water sources. I could just draw water from the river itself and use that for canals, which should be a little bit easier and better to do than just trying to make these small ditches, which I really fear eventually just doesn't work because they're too small and water level is generally also too high to actually make it work in this game. The general makeup of this neighborhood is going to be around one sort of centerpiece. The main square inside that half circle will be where I want to add some larger apartments, but also some restaurants and some shops, which sort of should function as a small city center for this little suburb, and then everything around it will just exist out of islands, literally and figuratively, that have these row houses on them and which connect to that centerpiece, and from that to the outside world as well. And much of the shapes will be very much like the houses that I've done in the last couple of episodes, really still playing with a grid-like pattern, but as you can see, sometimes just removing some roads and leaving some pedestrian paths, or playing with the shapes of the grid a little bit. So even though it's slightly on a grid, there are some waves in the roads as well, or sometimes just straight diagonals. There's no such thing as a straight diagonal. Sometimes just diagonals running straight through a grid to at least break it up a little bit and make it not so boring. But yeah, that is the basic makeup of this neighborhood. And something that I also sort of want to talk about, and this is quite important since I really feel it's a important realism aspects which I haven't gotten in this city so far, and what is one of my main complaints as to why I think it is so important to add more water interaction and why I think it's such a big problem that the city doesn't have it, is that realistically there actually is a minimum safety standard for new Dutch neighborhood developments. And as I've said in the first episode of this series, is that Dutch people like to just meander about something eternally until they actually plan it. So while a neighborhood can be planned far ahead, it still needs a lot of discussing and looking at it from all different angles to actually make it work eventually at some point in time. Now, one very important step in that is that new neighborhoods must actually be addressed in a way that they are safe when it comes to water. Because the issue is, being the Netherlands and being below sea level and even below the height of your rivers, is that you need some ways to, if it rains terribly, to catch that rain, and until you can transport it using those fancy windmills or things like that, you also need somewhere to store it. And this is where generally a lot of the ditches and ponds in the Netherlands come in, since they're not just there to make the entire neighborhood look pretty and land value pretty high, but also because there needs to be this way of getting rid, or at least storing your rainwater until you can get rid of it. It's very much like a popular thing nowadays, which is that many cities have these squares which are below like the street level of the rest of the city, so that when it rains, those squares can catch the rainwater, sort of store it for a while, become a little lake, and then when there's a drier period, they can get rid of that water again and the entire city doesn't flood, which is an excellent idea until the rain goes away and it leaves that square with green stuff and plants everywhere. But it's sort of that same idea of trying to catch the water and store it until someday that you can get it out there. And because of this water safety that is quite important to the Netherlands, there are many things which a new neighborhood does have to commit to, and I'm not entirely sure of what the exact things are that they need to do in order to get it water safe and approved by all the people who need to approve a neighborhood before it can be built. And I'm definitely no expert on this, but one of the ways in which this is very commonly and importantly done is by having all of these little ponds and ditches everywhere, just to be able to at least catch and store rainwater. And this is why I also feel like a major limitation of this city exists so far, because quite frankly this city just isn't, or at least major parts of this city probably just aren't safe when it comes to Dutch water rules, and in real life maybe would have flooded by now, and that's a realism aspect which sort of lack in this city. And of course water just looks nice as well. But yeah, that is in general why I want to add more water in the future, but so far it's something which is really hard to play with due to so many different factors, and this is especially true for farmlands, so that's why I'm still not adding any ditches around the farmlands, and just want to sort of keep the pedestrian paths as stand-ins for future, perhaps, ditches that I might add at some point in the future. It really just feels, to me at least, like the water tools in this game aren't entirely fit for trying to make a Dutch city, and that's just something I have to play around, or at least work around, I should say, before I can actually make it work, I guess. I want to find some ways to at least incorporate more water into the city, but it's really hard to do so. It's basically the basic message that I want to get out there. Now, something which I think is also worth talking about, aside from the water management of the city, I think is the way that the traffic is laid out over here. And I feel the basic idea really comes down to that this is a series of little islands of row houses, and I'm not talking about the islands inside the river, but more in a traffic perspective, that even though all of these row houses are placed in a very grid-like road pattern, all of these grids sort of form their own little island, since they aren't interconnected with any roads except just one road for each little island of row houses that connects them to the outside world and the rest of this neighborhood. And I feel this is quite important, since at least I feel, and realistically for a Dutch city, you want to avoid making it so car-centric. And this is quite a common critique, I think, of City Skylines in general, but it's a very car-centric game. It's very much like made to make those American grid-like cities, and that really greatly contrasts with what Dutch cities are all about, which is among shared space and bricks on your road. Also, a lot less of the grid-like way of building, and in City Skylines is really reflected by how you can only zone alongside roads, and you really have these asphalt roads everywhere. And, you know, even working within that, I wanted to at least minimize this very car-centric way of working with roads, And so really imitating the neighborhoods that you often find in the Netherlands, I wanted to make these little islands of grids. So for example, if you live in one of those houses in that curve over there, you're very close to the entrance of this neighborhood and also the center with the shops and stuff. But as you can see, if you're a car user, then you first sort of have to go into that entrance area and use the one entrance road into that little grid of houses. Even though it is so close to the entrance, this way of just having one little road or two roads that connects to one specific grid really sort of makes using a car a lot less fun and handy in this area. And so I really want to battle the car centrism with not just the road layout like that, but one thing which is also quite important is adding all of those little shortcuts everywhere. As you can see, there is that small road over there which goes from the grid which I just talked about with the houses outside the curve there to the center area, and the center area also sort of connects all of the sides with pedestrian roads and making some pedestrian roads alongside the sides of these neighborhoods as well, just to make sure that you can get just about everywhere with little shortcuts if you're a bike user or a pedestrian, which car users can't use. You could say the same actually about this diagonal which goes straight through this grid. Something which I should quickly talk about. Yeah, I forgot to turn off my... I forgot to turn on my loot for this recording over here. So yeah, this is actually the in-game loot. What was very funny actually I found was that on that super ultra great wonderful delicious glitch that I found where the grass was just extended up until the sky was really weird, but I had my loot turned off for that video, yet I still got some questions about what loot I was using. Well, this is what the temperate theme looks like. It's actually pretty good. I just find that there's an incredible amount of yellow in the loot overall that I think without all of the yellow shades it looks a lot more realistic. Anyway, that is grossly off topic. I wanted to also add a small school over here. I think it's just sort of shoved along the side there. I'm not too happy about it, just sort of like, oh, I still need a school, I'll just put that here. I might want to tackle that in the future and at least make that a little less awkward. I'm feeling I might want to put it closer to the center of this neighborhood, but for the time being, this is going to be the elementary school for this neighborhood. And also mention, by the way, that just one elementary school for this neighborhood is probably not enough, but that's something I should also get back to in the future. Overall though, this is going to be the final layouts of this neighborhood, and you can very clearly see those little living islands with row houses. Not just on the water, but also alongside the sides where there's little green spaces, but also roadless spaces between all the neighborhoods, which really make, and this is I think quite an important point, not just from probably my ideology of building cities, but also if you're playing this game in general, having the fact that car users need to take a longer route around a certain area where pedestrians and cyclists can just use these shortcuts which are everywhere, just makes traffic a lot better, and in this case, in any case, makes it a lot more Dutch, just to have those bicycle lanes just about everywhere which cut through neighborhoods and things like that. So yeah, just a word of advice, I suppose. If you're building a Dutch city or any type of themed city out there, it really can be a lot of fun, but also quite handy to sort of split up your residential areas into little islands and keep some green spaces in between them and make sure not to connect them with too many roads, while still adding all of these little shortcuts for pedestrians and cyclists everywhere. Only thing which I think I can really criticize about this general setup is that there's no real idea of mixed zoning, and this is something which you can very much also critique the American suburbs for, is that they're just endless areas of places to live, but you don't really work or shop or entertain yourself much here, and you're gonna move elsewhere for all of that. And I tried to at least minimize this a little bit over here by having the more mixed use parts in the middle of this neighborhood, just so that people don't have to move too far to at least go to their basic needs, like going to a supermarket or going to a small restaurant or snack corner shop. No idea what that should exactly be, but still there is quite a lack of mixed zone, you could say, in this type of making neighborhoods. I wanted to have a small body of water over here, just to also have that on this side, and really felt it would be so much better than just an empty patch of grass, and especially it would have been better than just a forest over there, because that would have probably made no sense in the context of this being the Netherlands. But as you could see, it was still a bit of a struggle to get the water level to be exactly where I wanted it, and accidentally flooded this area again a couple of times. Shouldn't be too bad, people can handle it. It is the Netherlands after all, so there's loads of emergency plans for that. But it's something which I shouldn't do, probably. There was actually this person, I think, who, I don't know when I ever heard that, but this person who said that, like, weed is legal in the Netherlands so that everybody can get high enough to avoid getting drowned by the sea, which I find quite hilarious. Actually, I got... oh, my voice isn't entirely great yet, but yeah, actually I found that I have had many comments about, you're making a Dutch city, eh? Just make sure you have the encourage bike policy and legalize weed, and that's something which should make your city realistically Dutch. And those are two things which I sort of still need to do. Actually speaking, at this point in time I have already encouraged biking, but I'm not sure about the weed parts, because realistically I'm not sure if I should actually do it. Anyway, that is extremely off topic. I wanted to add a bit of foliage over here. In hindsight, I actually think I could work with more foliage, especially given how the trees have gotten an update in snowfall, which I am not entirely happy about. There's loads of awesome things in the new update, but the trees which I've used throughout the city, which is that tree which you can see in the top left corner, which sort of arches around the stadium, which is now invisible because it has a terrible LOD, or non-existent LOD, is a tree which got sort of downscaled in the new updates. It doesn't have as many leaves anymore, it's not as dense as it was anymore, so I'll definitely come back to the foliage in the future. But yeah, as I was saying, the foliage I think is still quite very sparse in this city overall, and it's something which I might in the future at some point say, hey, I'll just do a foliage episode and add more detail and make it a bit more dense, especially in some areas where I don't quite have any tree lines yet. So that is this episode, which I might do in the future. But yeah, keep in mind that the foliage, at least in many parts of the city, are still a bit work in progress, and more of the overall idea than 100% what I want to go with. And now I just want to sort of close this off, as I was just talking about snowfall, by talking about the elephant in the room over here. Last episode in the description, but also in the comment section, I've sort of thrown a fit around snowfall, and I feel really bad about this in hindsight. Shouldn't have done it. I should also stop saying the word in hindsight so often. It's 2 words, but that doesn't matter. The issue was basically, for anybody who missed it, last episode I was pretty angry because my city couldn't load anymore, and actually spent my entire Saturday trying to get it to work to no avail. But I'm really happy to at least be able to say that I did get it back. It was eventually fine road heights which screwed things over, and with the new updates of fine road heights that the author brought out, which was very much requested, I think, the city works again, albeit I also need to leave Traffic++ in ghost mode, which leaves me with terribly rigged AI for traffic, among other problems. But yeah, the city is working again. I'll keep this going for quite a while. I'm not entirely sure how long I'll keep this city going for, because I have some other plans as well. But yeah, just as a small thoughts, I got the city to work again. I will be playing with perhaps some extra additions from Snowfall, at least the new terrain themes, of course, even though that was added in the free patch. But yeah, something to keep in mind. Also, I just wanted to just have this small plaza over here, just to provide a small, at least cozy, atmospheric little city center over here, despite it still being so modern and recently developed. I really felt that I still at least wanted to make it a bit atmospheric. Pro tip, by the way, if you have any sort of cold looking area with loads of concrete and modernist buildings, adding a ton of foliage should help alleviate that alienating effect of endless concrete, because a lot of foliage, quite frankly, just makes anything look very atmospheric and inviting. Anyway, that is about it for the time-lapse for today, but this incredibly already overly long video still has one real-time part, so I'm gonna hand it over to my past real-time self here. Alright, now this episode is already overly long, but I just wanted to quickly show off in greater detail and less speed what this area actually looks like, and maybe also talk a bit about the future and what I'm planning to do in the near future. But yeah, basically it's very similar to the houses that I've had so far, and I should stop using the half circles because you do see them quite often in road layouts, but this is getting a little bit ridiculous. So this should be the last of that, but over here I really wanted to have it since I wanted to have that small center with flat blocks and shops and some restaurants and stuff like that. But yeah, it's quite similar, as I said, to all the other neighborhoods. I just went overboard with the foliage, I think, and I tried some new lampposts. A little bit more modern. I think they came out today. They're called the white bendy things, and I kind of like them. I'm still not 100% sure about them, since you do often see lampposts that are more bendy and have these wide curves in newer neighborhoods, but they would have a separate lamp installed, and these are just white bendy lamps themselves. So I might still change that. Maybe some new lamps will come out in the future, but I do kind of like them. And in general, I think the area has quite a modern Dutch look to it this way, and yeah, that's pretty much that over there. Now over here is a basketball field where I don't actually know if there are any separate basketball posts. I was trying to find them, but I couldn't really find them, and I already had this thing placed, so I might want to still look into that because this is a bit of a weird thing at the moment. But yeah, the thing which I'm definitely most happy about in this area is the little plaza in the middle of it. I just wanted to make sure that I had a small center in the middle of this suburb, you know, where you could at least shop, but that would also have a bit of a cozy feeling to it, and at least sort of feel like a small city center. And that's why I also wanted to decorate it quite a lot and add some restaurants to it. And that's pretty much what this is like. And of course there's a circle around it because I couldn't stop myself from doing that. Here's the elementary school. I might still get a small industrial zone around here, especially since, and this is one of my biggest issues with trying to get this area to actually work, I don't have enough goods to sell at these things, which is weird because, well, I have the train, cargo train terminal over here, and that is pretty close to this, so I figured they would be able to actually get some goods out of other cities to sell over here, but apparently I can't. So even though this looks pretty nice at the moment, these buildings will soon be removed again because they can't sell stuff, and that's an issue I still need to fix. I suppose it's not too big of an issue. Another issue is also that the water level is a little bit low, like you can see this over here, and I'd rather have the water just above this little thing, or at least a little bit higher than it is at the moment. And the thing with that is that I don't think I just want to place another water source and raise the level of the water that way, because that means that this area will most likely flood. So that's something I still need to look into. But yeah, in the future, I plan on getting the university campus over here, which should be one large straight road, but I also want to work with a bit of a plaza and make it more of a pedestrian-focused university than just having a road system. Sort of just want to tuck the roads in the back and keep it mostly pedestrian and decorate it a little bit. And I might want to remove the stadium in the future. I don't really like it so far. It's very low poly, especially if you zoom out. The LOD is pretty bad on that one, and it's also a bit too large, I think. Plus it's FC Barcelona, that's way too obvious. So yeah, if I ever find a better stadium that actually works and has about the same size, then I may very well get a different football stadium over here. But yeah, that's it for today pretty much. Oh, maybe I should get a couple more shots of kind of going through this. I kind of like this street, actually. Now, I do have to say about this, as much as I like the Swedish houses, and as much as I think they do follow the same style that you often see in modern Dutch neighborhoods, for the next couple of neighborhoods that I'll be building, I kind of want to refrain from using them as much, because as you can kind of see, these areas which I've used the Swedish houses for are starting to become a little bit similar. And if I ever want to, well, if I am ever going to, which I will most likely do, remove this area and completely redo it, I might want to work a little bit more with the English houses as well as the English detached houses that I still have lying around. But yeah, that's something for the future. Also something for the future is the city center, which is right now is just like a gaping hole in the middle of the city, and it is quite painful to look at. So that's something I want to do in the future, but first the university, definitely. Anyway, thanks for watching this way too long video, and see you next time. Oh no, Anyway, I was